Hello, I'm Tom Rogers, and this is the Rebel Education Podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rebel Education Podcast. Today I am joined by the wonderful Pete Sanderson. Pete, give us a hello.
Hello.
The enthusiasm of this man is phenomenal. We are recording it at 11:53 on a Sunday morning. You've just been out walking with Ozzy, haven't you?
I went for a run. Yeah, we had an interesting running with a field of cows, two fields of cows actually. That made the run slightly longer than I meant it to be. But yeah, it was good. It was fun.
Sweet. In terms of the podcast today, Pete, the reason I've invited you onto the podcast is to discuss behaviour in schools.
Yeah.
And we're going to basically race our way through some of the most controversial topics. We're going to struggle to get through them probably without avoiding questions or answers. But we'll try our best, won't we? Because we know that social media especially is very polarised when it comes to debates about behaviour. So we're going to discuss some of the topics that people seem to bring up a lot. Before we start, though, can you just introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about your background in education and how you got into teaching in the first place?
So it's the family business, which I tried very hard not to work in. So but my mum was a teacher and an advisor. My dad is a professor, kind of lecturer in business at university. Auntie's teacher, uncle. You know, it's kind of it's in the blood. So I was like, sod that, I'll get a proper job. So I did tried lots of other things. I've been a scuba diver, bouncer, DJ for 10 years. I've tried lots of different jobs, and two of my mates, I ended up working in an office somewhere, and two of my mates became teachers. Never shut up about it, so I thought I'll give it a whirl. Volunteered as a learning mentor in a primary school and a secondary school, and thought, I've made an error. I shouldn't be doing this. So why am I not working in school? So I just signed up for a PGC the following year, and that was 15 years ago. So I'm very, very happy man.
Okay.
And then now, so I started a new job in September, overseeing on the leadership team, overseeing behaviour, disadvantaged students, absolutely love it. It's a great school.
How you find it? Because I know in previous posts you've worked in more of a teaching and learning capacity. So how have you found the transition there between the two?
I still have that role because I look at progress for pupil premium disadvantaged children, so that gets me into classroom. So I haven't lost that, but obviously there is a further focus on behaviour. So I still, and obviously behaviour and what happens in the classroom and engagement and strategies for teaching and learning, they're all part of the same thing. So yes, I've more time out of the classroom, more time working with staff and pupils and families and agencies and those sorts of things. But I'm not as involved. Next year the role will change again, and I will get back into the classroom more. But it's all part of the same. So there's a lot of similar nuts and bolts to it.
Perfect. And also, it's not just the teaching, obviously, because in the last, I don't know how long you can tell me, but you have Lesson Toolbox, which is your website, and it's kind of a resource directory along with lots of other things. When did that all kick off, and what gave you the impetus to start doing that?
I have a terrible memory, right? So, and I will forget, as all teachers do, you have these, great things that you do in the classroom. And as an NQT, PGC student, so I'd forget all these things. So I just write them down as a list. And I read the book by, Paul Guinness, the Teacher Toolkit?
Brilliant book. I love that book, I've got to say. Yeah, it's one of my absolute all-time. It's like, to be honest with you, I think that book beats a lot of what's out there. It's like 15 years old now or whatever, but it's still like it's just awesome. Like it's just awesome.
Absolutely, and I saw that and I thought, right, okay, this is the book of fantastic ideas. I'll write, like anything, you nick the ones that work for you and you ignore the ones you don't. So I started my own, and I was like, okay, teacher toolkit, right, okay, lesson toolbox. I'll have that. I don't want to nick someone else's idea. I'll have lesson toolbox. So I started lesson toolbox, and it was just something for me. So it's it was a list of 10, 20 ideas, and I just emailed it out to the staff at the school that I was working at the time. And then I started, and then, you go on conferences, you meet people, you go, I started this thing, and then you start emailing it out, and then I started getting, and then I'd update it and I'd send it out, and it like I say, it was just a thing for me, like good ideas. And then I just started, and then I'd start getting emails from people going, oh, there's this thing that you've got. I was like, oh, what thing? The lesson taught. So I then started sending it out to schools nationally, whatever. And then this Twitter thing started. So I when Twitter started, I thought it was the bit on Facebook where you say, "Oh, I'm having a piece of toast now," and I was like, "Why would there be a platform for people saying what they're doing? What an absolute waste of time!" And then I got into it and realised that Twitter was essentially a real-time magazine that you design yourself and that you put all these great ideas, and I thought, okay, well, I'll try the lesson toolbox on that, and then it just exploded. And then I started getting invited to conferences in the south of France and all over the place. So it was great. So it was just like I say, something that worked for me that just got bigger and bigger and started working for the people.
And how did you fit that in around work as well? I mean, in terms of the coding and updating and all the rest of it with the website and social media.
Initially, I'm a typical kind of obsessive. I could be a bit obsessed by it. I'd sit in front of the telly and I'd be doing it, and I'd be, get told off by my partner and others for spending too much time on social media, as we all do. And then it's got. I had a really nice chat with Ross McGill at what's that technology one in London?
Bet.
Yeah, I met him at Bet. And he started talking. So I was like, how do you do what you do? How do you you're constantly on there, you're constantly doing it. And he showed me a few tricks of the trade, a few apps that he said, well, that's not me all the time sat in front of my phone doing this. There are things that can do it for you. Yes, you set them up, but then once you've set them up, it can do it for you. So then I kind of, like you do, you learn and you grow and you find these things. And so I use apps for Buffer. So Buffer works for me quite well. So I set that up and it'll do it for me. So a few other bits and pieces.
TweetDeck as well, isn't there? It's quite handy.
Yeah, TweetDeck. There's a time hop. There's all these other things that can show you what in the past, what's worked, what's popular, and who your audience is. And you learn. And one thing Ross said to me, you learn who your audience is really quickly. If he puts something on about the conditions for teachers or these sorts of things, then he'll get loads of hits. If you put something on that's nothing to do with that, he'll get nothing. If I put a joke on there that thing's hilarious, no one will look at it. But as soon as it's about resources, engaging for teaching, engaging kids, and it kicks on. So you learn who's listening to you, who it is, what it's about, and then you realise why people want to listen to you.
Exactly, and I think for me, and I'm sure for you as well, Twitter is kind of a professional avenue for me. It's a professional account, but that doesn't mean that I don't necessarily share anything personal to me. It's just that it is primarily a professional account. I might use Facebook for more like personal stuff, I guess. But I suppose it's up to individuals, isn't it, how they use Twitter and how they use different social media platforms in the end.
I mean, I've got other accounts. I've got a personal one, like I follow scientists and comedians on a personal one, and I'll just can tell you whatever. But that's obviously the main one.
PT, I'll tell you what's annoying, mate. I think there's a wedding going on here. Can you hear those bells?
Very, very faintly.
That's going to be great on the podcast. I don't know how long it's going to go on for. They've done 3 minutes now.
It's ambience. It's it brings something to the podcast.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the actual kind of theme of the podcast, which is all about student behaviour. I want to start by asking you, because teacher wellbeing is important to me and it's important to a lot of other people. How important do you think behaviour in schools is when it comes to teacher wellbeing?
I think anyone deserves to go to work, to expect to be respected, as students do expect to go to school to be respected, to be supported by their peers and their customers, which which you could put into this a model, and to be supported, to enjoy, engage, to learn, to progress, and that's the same for anyone in any organisation. And like in any organisation, if that breaks down, if you have colleagues or people you work with who aren't being respectful to you, or who aren't treating you equally or supporting you, then that's going to affect your well-being and your day-to-day. And I include all parts of the community in that. So that's colleagues, children, parents, all that. So if there's something in there that's making you feel like you're not successful or you don't want to be there, then of course that's to the detriment of your well-being, and it needs to be addressed. So I think that's my response to that question. It's people, everyone deserves to be able to go to the organisation that they work with, the group of people that they work with, and to make me feel that they can achieve anything. And that's I don't differentiate between any stakeholders in that community.
Definitely, that makes perfect sense. And obviously, some teachers, we know this, do quit the profession over behaviour in their schools. We know that. Obviously, the key reason above that is workload, but behaviour is up there as well. So how do you think senior leadership teams and principals should support teachers? What should they be doing or not doing when it comes to supporting behaviour in their schools?
I think it's interesting. You go on these leadership calls, they talk about your vision. You've got to have this vision. Everyone works on this. I think you've got to set out your principles and values. This is who we are, and this is what we'll accept, and this is where we're going to, and this is how we're going to get there. That's an overriding strategy. And part of that is your teaching and learning strategy, your behaviour strategy, what you're going to do when things break down and things don't work, and that sort of thing. And that's your starting point, to say this is who we are, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is who our community is, and then you put in strategies and systems to support that. That's dependent on your staff, your community, your kids, and so you need to put in to getting down to the nuts and bolts and kind of zooming in. You need to have a behaviour management strategy that ensures that it's very, very clear to the kids, very clear to staff. There's no interpretation, if you like, because you get the best out of children when they absolutely know and understand what's expected of them and what the consequences are for not meeting those expectations. So clarity is very, very important, and communicating that effectively. And I've always thought that students, you get the best out of kids when they know what's expected of them. And I've also seen where that isn't communicated effectively, or it isn't consistent across an organisation, it breaks down because kids don't know where they are and they're expecting different things from different members of staff. Whilst there are personalities within there is a structure, and it's adhered to.
For sure. And would you say that SLT visibility is important within that as well? I mean, how visible do you think SLT should be? Are there any kind of caveats on that, or should they just be there as much as possible?
They should be there as much as possible. It should be visible. Should be kids should know they are. I've heard stories before of sometimes new head teachers or SLT who joined. They'll go to a classroom and the kids will like, who's this person walking in? The kids need to know who you are. They need to be able to come to you if they need to speak to someone. So it's essential.
How do you do that? How do you do that though, as a member of SLT? If you've got, say, a reduced timetable, like you're only teaching, I don't know, whatever, 10, 15 lessons, maybe less than that in many cases. How do you actually do that?
You're out. Well, in our school, you're on every duty, so you're there before school, every break, after school, you're there all the time. So there's no breaks where you're not out and about, talking to kids, talking to staff. So you know,
but my point would be is it easier to build really constructive, quality relationship with a group of students or individual students through teaching, through being in the classroom and teaching? I mean, personally, I always find it harder to build the kind of relationships, the premium relationships that I would like when I'm not teaching. I find it most easy to do that in the classroom because the students will recognise and appreciate the work you're doing as a teacher. I don't know how you find that, or whether whether you share that view, or whether you just think it's irrelevant.
I think you can do it. I think you do it in different places. I think about the classes that I've got that I teach. So I teach about 11 hours a week, but I've got one, like my year 10s. I've got them 5 hours a week. So that's fantastic. Yeah. That is, for me, my dream class. I see them every day. I see them more than their tutor does, because the tutor for half an hour. So I have them 5 hours. So you see them every day. You see them for an hour. They see you at your best and your worst, and they see you all the time. And they the love, if you like, is very present, and you get to know them really well. So yes, I can appreciate that does build a great relationship, because you're on that journey together, and you're following that lesson. Equally, though, I think if you have kids that you don't teach, you have a slightly different role there, don't you? Because you're not the one who's in the classroom, doing the learning and the feedback and all those sorts of the marking and all those things. You see them outside of the classroom, and that has its advantages and disadvantages as well. So for me, it's about, and you asked earlier about my philosophy. It's absolutely about relationships, and you can have those. You can build those relationships different ways. Because if you're not the classroom teacher, you can have a coaching role with them, especially if there's a relationship breaking down with a teacher, and go, all right, okay, so you've got Mr. Rogers today. You had that thing the other day. Come on, you can go in today, and we can work on that. What was the issue? Have you apologised for it? Did you do something wrong? Did he do something wrong? So you have to go into that mentally coaching role, don't you? So you can have it. You can build relationships anyway. Definitely.
I agree overall, I do. Just zooming in on kind of rewards and sanctions, because, in terms of establishing really high quality behaviour for learning, and therefore, in my view, that directly would impact teacher well-being and directly impact the way that teachers feel about their jobs. Sanctions and rewards are obviously really important. Now, with regard to sanctions policy, or a set of kind of sanctions or levels or steps or warnings that are going to be applied, what do you think are some of the good things and bad things that you've maybe seen or seen online or whatever about some sanctions systems? Are there any things to avoid? Are there any things that work well when it comes to the actual policy of sanctions and warnings and levels?
Yes, there are. I think ultimately you've got to involve the kids in that setting out of sanctions and rewards. We work closely with we have student ambassadors, so we'll talk to them about what should the sanctions be, what should the rewards be, what do you want, what motivates you, and I think if you're not having that dialogue, then if you're giving kids something they're not interested in, they don't want. So I've seen before certificates. So they're giving out certificates in assembly, and students were embarrassed about going up to get them. They didn't want to in their peers. I mean, there's something to address there anyway. Why don't you want to stand in front of your peers? That should be something we celebrate, and I've started to address that in a slightly different way. But it's about talking to them, and them understanding. Also, we haven't got a massive bag of money here, but we'll work with you. What can we do? So something we've come up with is a breakfast. So we have a breakfast for the kids who are doing well and achieving, and they really respond to that. So in terms of rewards, it's about asking them what they want. Trips, for example, I've seen schools where they trips to go on Alton Towers, go on Alton Towers trip. Kids that love Alton Towers. It's motivating. Why not go there? Give them and that enables you to set out some goals for them as well. Right? Okay. This is how many behaviour points that you will accept. So this is how many reward points you will go for it. We'll support you to get there. Blah blah blah. So it opens it up. So in terms of rewards, it's about talking to the kids and equally sanctions, right? Okay, what should happen to someone who is disturbing your lesson, who's repeatedly interrupting, what support should we put in place? So that's a dialogue with them. Obviously, there's a theme, if you like, online and in the media about isolation booths and and absolutely students should not be put in there and forgotten about. Right, you're in there for the rest of the day or the next 2 days.
Yeah, of course.
But equally, you have to have a sanction that students don't want to. As an individual, if you've done that, you want something that's going to support their behaviour and get them back on track and go, right, if you behave like this is what's going to happen. If an isolation booth, if they think that, nice one, this is not something that's going to change my behaviour, then don't do it. It's not it's a waste of time. You've got to have something that's...
Yeah, the point for me of a sanction would be also, it's not... There has to... I think what the word, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're alluding to is a deterrent. There has within a sanctions policy, there has to be, unless I'm being silly, there has to be some deterrent in there. Because as you say, if we said, okay, you've been removed from teacher X's lesson for XYZ, and they've given you, 2-3 chances. You've already done a detention for that teacher the previous week, or there's been a pattern. Mm-hmm. But then the next level up from that is a conversation with Mr. Sanderson for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That's the next. That's the kind of next port of call up the scale.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a deterrent, and I think some people would probably argue that that sanctions aren't about deterrence; they're about reflection, or they're about reflecting. But some students, I don't think, are. It depends on the student, doesn't it? Some students are brilliant at reflecting and being able to self-regulate and everything else, but others might not be. So there has to be a deterrent element to a sanctions policy, I think. But with regards to booths, or to me, and this is where we get into the technicality of kind of isolation units or quiet rooms. It was called a quiet room in my first school, because to me, people do work silently and in cubicles or booths in plenty of jobs. If we think about jobs they're going to go into, call centres, customer service units, there will be booths with dividers, with a laptop, where you are expected to be quiet because other people are on calls.
Yeah.
Now, I understand if it's a draconian kind of... if it's too draconian, I get that, but surely there has to be an element of that within the sanction policy. There has to be an element of not necessarily isolation, but there has to be an element of, there has to be a backstop.
Yeah, it's what they do with the time as well. So whilst you're in there, what are you doing? You just, what's the work you're doing? So, for example, something we've done, if there's a racist incident or something pertaining to that kind of behaviour, we have a project for them to do. So, for the humanities team have put together on, elements from Black History Month and, get to understand, right, this is... So whilst they're there, they will do a project and they'll have conversations with staff and be supported to move forward. Right, okay, this is what's happened. So the work they would do in that time, that alone time for them to reflect on what they've done is constructive. And so it's nuanced, isn't it? There are isolation booths and there are isolation booths. Like you said, I'm in an office at the moment on my own. I'm doing it, obviously I'm talking to you, but this is where I come and work.
No, exactly.
Focus on what I need to do. My other kind of philosophy is about unconditional positive regard, which I nicked from a conference recently. whilst I talk to those, whilst I will walk a child to that room, I am positive. I am right. This is what's happened. This is what's going to happen. You know, I'm not. You know, like as I said earlier, I'm making that child realise they can achieve, move forward. They will learn and grow, and this is where they are, and this is what you're here today, and okay, let's use this time, and let's move on tomorrow, and let's do something else. So it's nuanced, isn't it?
Definitely, and it's the attitude, isn't it, of the kind of member of staff or teachers towards the student. I agree with you. It's that unlimited positive regard. It's saying, well, listen, after this incident, we're moving on. We're back to zero. The board is wiped. Yeah. We're starting from zero. Yeah. It's reiterating that message that this is about your learning. This is about your future success. This isn't just about a rule and punishment. This is about what is best for you based on the evidence we have of what works. You know, and that's why we're doing it. And I think it's trying to push that message as much as possible. Also, another powerful one that I always think is useful is the this is not about you, it's about your behaviour. It's about your behaviours that you're exhibited rather than you as a person, because I understand the child might get it into their head that, you know, you're picking on them, or that there's some kind of personal issue, personalising it. And it's important to say and repeat that, you know, that this is about the behaviours you're exhibiting that are disrupting other students and your own learning, rather than like a personal thing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Describe the behaviour, not the child, essentially.
Yeah, and what about restorative justice? I mean, have you seen any use of that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that NAS, UWT, the union, have expressed concerns about restorative justice approaches. I must say I share some of their concerns in the wrong. Again, it's all about context, I think, and nuance. But what are your thoughts on that, restorative justice?
I think my understanding of restorative justice is about the example that comes to my head is about bullying. So I'm thinking about a transgender child that I've worked with who's been bullied, and how the very kind of complex nature of that situation. You know, the bully being someone who is very low self-confidence. You know, there's the issue the bully. So going forward, I've worked with the family to say, okay, to move forward. At the end of the day, this is some young girls fall out all the time, and it's, at one level, it's about them learning about how to interact with each other. But then there's a bullying issue and some obviously transgender issues. So I sat with the family and talked about, what might be helpful going forward is that we meet to get a mediated meeting. We come together and we talk. How would you feel about that? And at that point, the student didn't want to do that, and that was fine. But that was an option. And that going forward, if that does happen at some point, then that would be helpful for them to talk, because it's about the victim being able to say how they feel and to talk about what the impact of the behaviour of the bully done, and also the bully to talk about perhaps why they might have felt like that and to ask questions and to move forward. It wasn't right at the time, and actually since then I've seen those two girls talking to each other and smiling in the corridor, and for me there's still an issue, there's still an opportunity to learn there and to move forward, and I probably will come back and suggest that. But as we said, these things are complicated, so it's not always right to do that, because people feel if they've been been made to feel belittled or inferior, or whatever's happened. If it's not right for them to do that, then that's not right, and in other situations it might be. So it's a tool, isn't it? It's a tool like anything else, and that's we've talked about a few strategies today. It's a tool that if it's right at the time, then it can do. I think it can work very well, and it's something that I would definitely have in my toolbox. In my toolbox of behaviour strategies, I think it can work very well.
What does the term zero tolerance mean to you?
Well, you put that in your. So we chatted before about what we were going to do today, Tom. So I had to look at that yesterday. So my understanding is it's school. I've looked at some examples in America where it's like this. If you do X, Y, and Z, you're gone, and there's no conversation. And that's worrying because, you know, you can think about knives and drugs and those sorts of things are around, and I completely and utterly understand that. But I'm aware of schools where a child has brought a knife into a school and they've got it out and they've been threatened. You know, they've been threatening. You know, I'm thinking of the child I'm thinking about was in a terrible situation, and but again, they had the knife. It's not acceptable, and they were permanently excluded. I can think of another example where a child had the knife in their bag. The background for that child was that they felt extremely vulnerable. It stayed in their bag. A friend of theirs told us that they had the knife in the bag, and then we got it, and that child, you know, there was a different outcome for that child. And both of those situations were right. I can imagine in a zero tolerance situation, there's a gross injustice there done by you know, yes, you've got to think about the impact of having the knife and what could have happened, but there is nuance everywhere, and you've got to be able to have rules when you need them, but also rules that you've got to, you know, you be human and intelligent about using, and you've got to be able to say, well, actually, in this situation, here's a situation where it would be wrong to do that. And I think if you set in a stall out to say this is a zero tolerance and we're not going to do it, then you're going to lose kids who, you know, that you need to support and do the things with.
Absolutely, and it's a little bit like a sanction system for a teacher. You know, the system is there to use, but before you use that system, you should be using all kinds of assertive techniques and strategies before you step into that sanction system. It's there to support your classroom management and not the classroom management. And maybe there's some echoes there on a whole school level with no excuses, you know. There has to be knowledge, common sense, context, understanding. You know, there has to be a really deep thought process, in my view, before with any kind of system of sanctions or exclusion or whatever.
It's about, you know, there's no set of rules and tolerances or whatever that fits every child. So you've got to be intelligent about it. But at the same way, if you don't have any of those things, then you've got consistency. Well, so you walk the line between those two things, and that's where, you know, leadership, personal leadership. I'm not talking about SLT now, but clearly that's part of it. Comes into play. You've got to be intelligent about it.
I think having one typecast model that you have to adhere to and that you do all the time is slightly, you know, it doesn't allow for that pragmatism that I think the best teachers and leaders exhibit on a daily basis. It might straitjacket perhaps sometimes, and I don't know if you agree with that, but that would be my concern with some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what you're eloquently saying better than I did.
PT, no, that's not true. So, I mean, we've covered quite a lot there, really, on behaviour. I suppose my last question you would be is if you had a NQT or a new teacher who'd come into a school, let's say, for example, they've finished their training and they've just started at their first school, and the behaviour in the school is relatively challenging. What key bits of advice would you give to them, or what would you say to them? Because they might not have any prior knowledge of how to deal with that at that stage. So, what advice would you use beyond kind of the normal strategies to that person?
Whenever I walk into a classroom and I take it on for the first time, so if I'm doing cover or by starting a new school, which I did this year, I talk about my 3 rules. So my first rule is about respect. And when I say that, the kids, I can see in the kids' faces, they're going to say, "You will respect me." That's what they're expecting. And I'll say, "I will be respectful to you. Yeah. I'll never call you a name. I'll never make you feel bad about yourself. And I'll never shout at you unless you're about to injure yourself, or I think you can't hear me or you're ignoring me. I might raise my voice, but that's it. I will be respectful to you at all times." And you can see the face go, oh, I thought I was going to say it. That's me. If you are in my classroom, you must be respectful. I will be respectful to you, but I'd also like it if you're respectful to each other. So that might look like, you know, if someone's answering a question, don't talk over them. I won't talk over you. If I do, and apologise. You know, if I make a mistake, I'll say sorry. That's my first rule. My second rule is, if I ask you to do something, you've got 15 seconds to do it. That's quite a long time. And I'll get my watch out and I'll go ahead. So it's like, please can you be quiet? You get the idea, right?
I do. I got that one, Pete. I got that one.
So then I got, see, so if I have to wait longer than that, then, you know, we might have to think about what we might do about at that point. And my third rule is, if you contribute and if you're, if you're working hard and you're trying to ask questions and you're trying to do your best and you make mistakes, then you will be rewarded. And what type of reward should we have, guys? And I'll say, if you're doing fantastic, you have your name on the board. Every time you do something awesome, I'll put a thing next to your name. And those are my 3 rules. And so that's what I'd say to an NQT is about, kids need to know that you care about them. You care about their lives,
Agreed.
The outcomes of their lives, that you are there for them to support them and for them to be successful, them to be achieved, whatever you want. And if that is your starting point, that as soon as other people understand that's what you're there for, they will come with you. And that's my principle, my absolute belief. And every time I've done that and shown that to people, their behaviour management at whatever stage their career is at, and I've supported people at many levels, it starts to move forward. And that's my overriding principle. So if you do that, I remember when we started teaching, people say, don't smile till Christmas. Don't smile till Christmas. So, you've got to be hard, but then you can be, it's absolute and utter nonsense. You need to be yourself. And if that version of yourself is quite hard, then, maybe think about how that comes across and what kids are thinking when you speak to them. But that's absolutely your starting point. And if that's your starting point, then everything else it will slot into place.
Pete, you're a legend, mate. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I was very happy to do it. I hope we can talk about something else. I've got lots of now. I've broken my podcasting cherry. I'm eager to talk about lots of other things.
Well, I would love to have you back on, Pete. Very, very, maybe after the summer, because small doses and everything.
Absolutely.
That's a joke. But seriously, it's been awesome having you on. And the knowledge that's come out of you on this podcast, Pete, is phenomenal. It's less.
We'll have to reciprocal one. I'll do one on you. So we'll think.
Oh God! To be honest with you, I think we're both pretty much on the same page about pretty much everything. So that's nice when you speak to somebody who is a kindred spirit. So
does that make a good podcast though? We need to be.
No, I know.
So we start arguing, but yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tom. You are a massive hero of mine, mate. And seriously, I'm very honest about these things. I think you're mega. I follow you probably a bit more than I should, and more than you know. I'm watching you.
God help me. I mean, you can't see that on the podcast, but Pete, just for everyone's information, he's just veered his head towards the camera and kind of his forehead's just appeared on my webcam. So anyway, Pete, all the best, mate, and hope to speak to you soon. This has been the Rebel Education Podcast. You can download it on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, and YouTube. So enjoy listening to it, and I'll be back soon with more super guests. Cheers, Pete.
Cheers.